The halls of the Red Keep always smelled like blood, but only a few noticed. Eddard Stark did. He walked them often, not as a lord, but as a whisper, a shadow with a sword. The Mad King never called him by name. He didn't have to. When ravens came with sealed wax and red ink, Eddard understood. Another target, another silence that needed enforcing. And in exchange, Winterfell thrived untouched, unbothered by war or tax. People thought he was a stoic, grim northern lord with too much honor and not enough charm. But truth was, honor made the best mask for a killer. No one questioned a Stark, especially one who never smiled. It began when Rickard Stark, his father, was summoned to King's Landing. The court murmured rebellion, but Eddard had already been inside the city's walls 2 weeks before. Not as a son, but as a servant of fire. The Mad King had whispered to him in the throne room, barefoot, eyes shining like wildfire. "I have a gift," Aerys murmured, fingers clenching the iron throne. "A mercy only the North can offer. You are winter's bite. Use it." Quietly. That night, Eddard slit the throat of a Maester who whispered rebellion into Lord Hightower's ear. His blade didn't shake. It never had. Years passed. No one suspected. Robert drank, Stannis brooded, Jon Arryn wrote endless scrolls of warnings. But Eddard remained invisible, a presence that never lingered, a loyal dog who growled only when commanded. When Rhaegar vanished with Lyanna, the fire began to spiral. Rickard was burned alive, Brandon strangled trying to save him. And yet Eddard did not cry, because he was already in the chamber below the throne room, killing a man who had plotted. With dawn, he received the order one day before Lyanna was taken. It came with a dagger made of obsidian and a note. "He whispers too much, make him bleed cold." And he did. But Lyanna was already gone. That's when something inside him began to crack. The blood didn't feel the same. His sword was still, sharp, his hands steady, but his heart, his damn heart, started to wake up. Too late. Rhaegar never ordered the taking of Lyanna, not the way Aerys claimed. But Aerys needed chaos. And Eddard, he was just a tool, disposable, and suddenly painfully aware of it. When Robert raised his banners, Eddard was not at Winterfell. He was in the Riverlands, hunting a bannerman who once praised Tywin too loudly at a feast. His orders were clear: remove the tongue, then the man. But something shifted. That day, he only removed the tongue. Rebellion raged, and the Mad King still sent his ravens. Eddard received his last order in a blood-stained envelope. "Bring me." And Tywin's eyes, that's when Ned Stark vanished from the war. He didn't join Robert right away. He didn't even go home. He wandered, blade still sharp, soul dulled by years of silent obedience. The day he stood in the throne room after Robert's victory, he stared at the Iron Throne, not with ambition but with memory. He saw blood on every spike. He smelled it in the stone. And when Jaime Lannister explained why he killed the king, Eddard didn't scold him. He only said, "Too quick a death." Because the Mad King had burned thousands. But the worst thing he did was turn Eddard Stark into a ghost, a man with honor in public and hell inside. Eddard Stark returned to Winterfell a different man. Not older in appearance. No, the cold preserved him well, but hollow in ways no one dared name. Catelyn saw it in his eyes the first night they shared a bed. His body moved like a man, but his soul twitched like a beast that had lived too long, in darkness. She asked him once, gently, what happened during the war. He said, "I buried a friend." He never told her how many. As Warden of the North, he wore his cloak of honor like a shroud. Maester Luwin praised his judgment. The bannermen called him just. The small folk believed he was the last good man left in Westeros. But Ned Stark had secrets buried deep in the crypts, secrets that breathed under stone. The Mad King's death didn't erase the orders. There were letters that still came, years after the rebellion, unsigned, with that same red wax seal, the kind that told him which man in his court would one day plot against Robert. Or which merchant was funneling coin toward remnants of loyalist cells? He thought they'd stop, that once Eris burned, the game was done. But someone else had inherited the network. Varys. The spider didn't just collect whispers. He recycled. Blades. One raven carried a single word. Again. Eddard burned the letter, but he couldn't unsee the name it held. Benjen Stark, his brother. The young boy who once chased him through the Godswood barefoot, laughing. The one who dreamed of joining the Night's Watch not for glory, but to escape the weight of being the last son. According to the letter, Benjen had been seen meeting with Blackfire loyalists beyond the wall. Ned didn't believe it, wouldn't believe it. But belief never stopped his blade before. He rode alone to Castle Black with no escort, no raven of explanation. Just a sword wrapped in old leather, the same one he'd used in the Red Keep's shadows. His excuse was simple: to speak with Benjen about his vows. His real purpose? To see if his brother's eyes betrayed him. Benjen welcomed him like nothing had changed. They drank, shared memories, even laughed. But Ned watched every move, listened to every pause, and late one night he crept into Benjen's chambers and searched. No letters, no seals, no maps. Only a scrap of parchment written in Benjen's own hand. Eris may be gone, but his fire lives on. In the snow, it waits. Ned didn't sleep that night. He stared at the stars and wondered how long he had been a puppet, how deep the roots of this treachery went. Had Eris planted his madness in every corner of the realm, even in his own family? He returned to Winterfell, the sword still clean, but his thoughts stained. He told no one what he found. Not even Benjen knew he'd searched him, but he sent a letter to Varys, unsigned, as they had always done in the past. He is not the threat. Not yet. Varys never replied. Years passed. Ned grew quieter, more still. He clung to his children like driftwood in a storm. Every time he saw Arya hold a practice sword or Bran climb a tower, he thought of how easily obedience had made him a murderer. He promised himself he would not let that happen again. But old ghosts don't sleep. They write letters. And one arrived the day Jon Arryn died. No wax seal this time, just a folded scrap of fine parchment tucked into the corner of his study. The dragon returns. You must remember who you are. There was no signature, but the scent of wildfire lingered, faintly on the paper, and Eddard Stark felt the cold whisper of the past crawling up his spine once more. When Robert Baratheon rode into Winterfell, the past followed behind him like a shadow dressed in gold. Ned greeted his old friend with the face the world expected, solemn, respectful, weary. But inside, he was calculating. The king's arrival wasn't a surprise. The reason for it was. Jon Arryn was dead. Poisoned, they whispered. But Ned knew better. Jon had written to him weeks before, words full of urgency and terror. He hadn't shared the letter with Catelyn. He hadn't needed to, because Jon knew about the letters, the deaths, the old missions buried under ice and silence. Jon had once tried to stop him, once called him a traitor to his own code. But Ned had explained it the only way he could. I kill quietly so others don't have to scream. Jon never forgave him for that, and now he was dead. Robert wanted Ned as Hand of the King, a desperate plea from a drunk king who had lost his temper, his friends, and his reason. Ned didn't want the role, not because of politics, but because he knew what King's Landing really meant. The city knew him, not as Warden of the North, but as a blade that obeyed madness. He stood that night in the crypts, beneath the statue of Lyanna. You knew what I was, he whispered, and you still loved me. Or maybe you loved who I pretended to be. Her stone eyes didn't answer. But Jon Snow, her son, stood just behind him, quiet and still. Is it true, Jon asked, that I'm not your son? Ned turned. For a breath he saw Rhaegar in Jon's jawline, Lyanna in his eyes, and something else, something ancient and dangerous behind both. "You are my blood," he said, and walked away before he had to explain what kind. He rode south with Robert. Again, leaving Winterfell not for honor or family, but because silence demanded it, because secrets rot slower in warmer places. King's Landing had changed since the rebellion, but the stench remained. Whispers in the walls, rats that wore, Silk and Varys waiting like a spider that never needed to rebuild its web. They met in the dark, no guards, no titles. Varys didn't smile. "I missed you, Lord Stark." "I'm not your lord," Ned said coldly. "No. You're still his sword, though, aren't you?" Varys held out a scroll. "Jon Arryn found the truth. That's why he died." Ned didn't take the scroll. "Truth gets men killed." "Indeed." Varys's eyes glittered. "But silence keeps kingdoms burning." Later that night, Ned read the scroll. Not once, 5 times. It wasn't just about Cersei's children. That part everyone suspected. The deeper truth was older, buried. Aerys had fathered another child, hidden, raised in Essos, trained not as royalty but as vengeance incarnate. And Varys had protected that secret. "You want me to kill him," Ned whispered aloud, staring. "Into the fire, just like before." But something had changed. This time he didn't want to obey. He thought of his children, of Jon, of how long he had killed in darkness, believing it was for the good of the realm. But the realm never healed. It only bled in new directions. He threw the scroll into the fire. If Varys wanted that child dead, he could do it himself. But the spider had spun this web for too long, and Eddard Stark wasn't sure who the real threat was anymore. The bastard across the sea, or the eunuch who pulled strings with no name attached. The next morning, Ned met Littlefinger. "Petter." Baelish smirked, all lies and confidence. "King's Landing changes men, Lord Stark. Are you certain you'll remain so honorable?" Ned looked him dead in the eye. "I'm not the man you think I am." Baelish chuckled. "Oh, I suspect you're worse." That night, another letter arrived. "He moves. Stop him, or everything burns again." No signature, just a drop of dried blood at the corner of the parchment. And Eddard Stark felt the Mad King's whisper echoing in his ears once more. The days grew heavy in King's Landing. Eddard Stark walked through the capital like a man carrying corpses no one else could see. Every corridor, every feast, every whispered court meeting reminded him of blood, of duty, of orders obeyed in silence. Robert drank more than he ruled. Cersei watched more than she spoke. And Eddard? He listened, not to what people said, but to what they feared. The scroll from Varys was only the beginning. More ravens arrived, messages with no names, symbols, words only a killer trained by the Mad King would understand. One bore a simple phrase, "The child of Ash walks now." It was Daenerys, the last true-born daughter of Aerys the Sioux. Word had reached Westeros that she had married a warlord across the sea, a Dothraki Carl. A pregnancy followed. Fire reborn. Robert wanted her dead, visibly, officially. He called a small council meeting and roared, "She's a threat. If she bears a son, we face another war. Kill her now." Eddard sat still. His fingers trembled beneath the table, though no one saw, because years ago he had received a letter with Daenerys's name on it. An order, "Kill the babe before she speaks her first word," and he had refused. It was the first order he had disobeyed. He remembered standing at the docks in Braavos, watching the ship that carried her sail away. He could have reached it, could have stopped it, but he didn't. He thought the threat would die on its own. He told himself mercy was a choice. Now it came back in the form of royal rage. He stood in that chamber and told Robert no. "I will not be part of murdering a child." Robert's face turned red. "She's not a child. She's a dragon." But Eddard held the king's gaze. then slay her yourself." That night, Circe came to him. She didn't knock, just walked into his chambers as if the door didn't exist. Her voice was colder than winter. "You were his blade," she said. Ned didn't respond. She stepped closer. "I know. Varys knows. Even Littlefinger whispers it in brothels. You killed for Aerys. How many? Do your children know the cost of your honor?" Eddard gritted his teeth. "Get out!" Circe smirked. "You served fire once. Now you pretend to be ice. But ice cracks, Lord Stark." She left him there in the dark. Later that week, a hooded man waited outside the Hands Tower. No words. Just a dagger wrapped in red cloth. No note, but a scent Eddard could never forget. Wildfire. He knew the target. Varys wanted Daenerys dead. This time, no politics. No council. Just old ghosts demanding one last kill. But Ned Stark didn't move. Instead, he handed the dagger to a blacksmith and said, "Melt it." The man asked no questions. Gold did not care about origins, but betrayal did. 2 nights later, Jory. Cassell was killed, stabbed in the eye outside a brothel. A message. Eddard found a letter on his desk the next morning, sealed with no wax, just folded once. "Obedience is life. You've forgotten." He hadn't forgotten. He remembered everything. The screams in the dungeons under the Red Keep, the faces of men who begged for mercy before his blade found their neck, the families he'd condemned because a madman dreamed in fire and blood, and he remembered Lyanna, not as the girl who died, but the one who looked at him once, hands shaking, and asked, "Do you even know who you are anymore?" That was the moment the blade had dulled. He thought leaving the shadows would erase the past, but all he had done was carry it north, and now the past wanted payment. He wrote a letter, not to Varys, not to Circe, to Jon. "If anything happens to me, find the truth. About her, about you, about me. You were always the one who could bear it." He sealed it, gave it to a raven bound for Winterfell. That same night, footsteps echoed outside his chamber, quiet, precise, trained. He drew his sword. Old instincts, old blood. But no one came. Only another letter under his door. "The wolf dies in daylight. Let us hope he doesn't howl too loud." Eddard Stark, the silent blade of a mad king, now stood on the edge of his final reckoning. The day Eddard Stark fell, the sun was too bright. King's Landing hummed with the sounds of merchants, horses, and lies. The banners of House Baratheon rippled over the Red Keep, but beneath them, treachery bloomed like rot under fresh paint. Ned had one last move, one last reach for justice. He held the letter from Jon Arryn, the truth about Joffrey's blood, and stood in the throne room not as a warrior, not as a hand, but as a man clawing toward redemption. He told Circe everything, gave her the warning she didn't deserve. "Leave with your children," he'd said. "Take the gold, the titles. Just go." But she didn't run, she laughed. "You still think you're saving anyone?" she asked, stepping so close he could smell the lilac in her hair. "You've killed more people than Robert ever touched. The North may whisper your name with reverence, but the South remembers what you did for Aerys. Varys remembers." "I remember." He stood still. "You can try to be a hero now," she whispered, "but heroes don't get statues. They get graves." By the time Robert was dead, brought down by a boar or wine or a queen, Ned was already surrounded. Petter, Baelish betrayed him with a grin, soft as silk and twice as sharp. "I did warn you," Littlefinger said, placing a dagger at Ned's throat. "You're not the man you think you are. You're just the last ghost of the Mad King's reign." The dungeons were dark, but familiar. He'd walked them before. As hunter, not prey. He remembered every scream that had echoed off those walls. Some he caused, some he only witnessed, but none had ever been his, until now. Varys visited him once, in the blackness. "You had a choice," Varys said softly. "Obedience or chaos. You chose rebellion. That child across the sea, she will bring fire again, and you threw away your chance to snuff it out." "I threw away nothing," Ned rasped. "I just stopped being your dog." Varys stared at him for a long moment, then prepare to die like a man. "It's slower." And it was. The deal was struck behind closed doors. Sansa begged, Cersei schemed, Varys manipulated, and Ned, he agreed to lie just once more, if it meant protecting his daughters. He stood in the courtyard, eyes cast forward. The people roared. Some cursed, some wept, and others threw stones, calling him traitor. He didn't flinch, because he wasn't dying for honor. He wasn't dying for Robert, or the North, or even the crown. He was dying to bury a life of blood, to put to rest the silent blade he had once been. And maybe, just maybe, the wolf who had walked in shadow could finally die in the light. The sword came down. The crowd gasped, and silence fell. But far to the north, in the cold halls of Winterfell, a raven arrived. Jon Snow unfolded the letter. With shaking hands it read, "You are my blood, you are her son, but more than that, you must be better than I was. Do not obey, do not kill for kings, be the man I should have been. And when fire returns, meet it with truth, not silence." The ink had faded in places, but the message was clear. The quiet wolf was gone, but the howl he left behind would echo through generations. And maybe one day the world would remember not the man who obeyed, but the one who finally said no.